The massive space station hung in the darkness like a glowing city among the stars. The Galactic Academy stretched for miles in every direction, its silver walls reflecting the light of distant suns. Ships from dozens of worlds docked at its ports every day, bringing students from across the galaxy to learn together. Commander Jiwan stood at the viewing window of the Earth transport ship, watching the Academy grow larger as they approached. Her hands were steady, but her heart beat fast. Today marked the first time in human history that Earth children would attend the most important school in the galaxy. Behind her, families gathered their belongings and tried to calm their nervous children. The Kim family checked their bags for the third time. Mr. Kim patted his son Minho on the shoulder while Mrs. Kim made sure his favorite snacks were packed safely. Minho was 12 years old with bright eyes and a curious smile, though right now he looked worried. "Remember to eat well and sleep enough," Mrs. Kim said softly, smoothing down Minho's hair. "And call us every day, okay?" "I will, Mom," Minho replied, leaning into her touch. Nearby, the Park family was having a similar conversation. 9-year-old Yuna held her mother's hand tightly while her father knelt down to her level. "You're going to do great things," Mr. Park said gently. "But if you ever feel scared or lonely, you call us right away. We love you no matter what happens." Yuna nodded, her small fingers squeezing her mother's hand. Mrs. Park had tears in her eyes but smiled bravely. For her daughter, the Lee family stood together in a tight group. The twins Taiho and Nari were 10 years old and usually full of energy, but today they stayed close to their parents. Mr. Lee had his arms around both children while Mrs. Lee checked their bags one more time. "Look out for each other," Mrs. Lee whispered to the twins. "And remember, being kind is more important than being smart." Dr. Hyungwoo, Earth's cultural representative, watched the families with a warm smile. He had spent years preparing for this moment, learning about alien cultures and customs. He knew the other species would find human behavior strange, but he hoped they would understand in time. The docking process began with loud mechanical sounds that echoed through the ship. Through the windows, they could see alien beings moving around the docking bay. Some walked on 4 legs, others floated in the air, and a few had skin that changed colors. "Attention passengers," came the announcement. "We have arrived at Galactic Academy Station. Please prepare for disembarkation." The human families gathered their children close as the airlock opened. Cool, clean air rushed in, carrying strange scents from a dozen different worlds. Commander Ji-won stepped forward first, followed by Dr. Hyunwoo and the families. The docking bay was enormous, with ceilings that disappeared into darkness above. Alien students and their guardians moved about their business, but many stopped to stare at the humans. Some pointed with various appendages, others made sounds that might have been talking or laughing. A tall, thin being with gray skin and large black eyes approached them. This was Headmaster Zix of the Vortex species. His face showed no emotion as he looked down at the human group. "Welcome to Galactic Academy," Headmaster Zix said in a flat, mechanical voice. "I'm surprised by the number of adult guardians you have brought. Most species send their young ones alone." Commander Ji-won stepped forward. "These are the children's parents. On Earth, families stay together during important transitions." "Interesting," Headmaster Zix replied, though his tone suggested he found it more puzzling than interesting. "The young must learn independence quickly here. Constant guardian presence may hinder their development." Dr. Hyunwoo joined the conversation. Human children develop strong bonds with their families. This gives them confidence to face new challenges. A group of adult aliens had gathered nearby, watching the exchange. One of them, a large creature with thick armor-like skin, stepped forward. This was General Korex of the Krellian Empire. "Confidence comes from strength and discipline," General Korex said in a deep, growling voice. "Krellian young are tested from birth. Only the strongest survive and thrive." "The Etherian way is different still," added a floating, shimmering being, whose voice sounded like wind chimes. "Our young spend years in solitary meditation, learning to rely only on themselves and their inner wisdom." Mrs. Kim overheard the conversation and moved protectively closer to Minho. She didn't understand all the alien words, but she could sense disapproval in their voices. Mr. Park did the same with Yuna, while the Lee parents gathered their twins. Between them, the alien adults noticed this behavior immediately. They exchanged looks that clearly showed they thought the humans were being overprotective. "Your young seem very dependent on guardian approval," observed Headmaster Zix. "This could be problematic in our academic environment." "They're just children," Mrs. Park said quietly but firmly. "They need love and support to grow properly." General Corex made a sound that might have been laughter, but it was not friendly. "Love makes weakness. Young Krellians learn this early. They become strong through hardship, not comfort." The Etherian being drifted closer, its form shifting like mist. "Attachment creates suffering. Our young learn to exist without such emotional bonds. It makes them wise," Dr. Yunwu tried to explain. "Humans believe that love and support help children become brave and caring adults. When children feel secure, they're willing to try new things and help others." "Fascinating theory," Headmaster Zix said, making notes on a glowing device. "We shall observe how your methods perform in practice." The alien students had been watching from a distance, and now some approached to get a better look at the humans. The Vorthak young moved with precise, mechanical steps. They showed no emotion and asked direct, logical questions about human anatomy and customs. The young Krellians stood at attention in perfect formation. Even the smallest ones carried themselves like soldiers, their faces serious and determined. They looked at the human children with what seemed like pity for their obvious weakness. The Etherian youth floated silently nearby, their forms shifting and changing. They communicated without words, using patterns of light and color that danced. Across their translucent bodies, Minho stepped forward hesitantly, trying to be friendly. "Hi, I'm Minho. What's your name?" A young Vorthak stared at him for a long moment. "Designation: Student 47 Beta. Personal names are inefficient." "Why do you seek social interaction instead of focusing on academic preparation?" Minho looked confused and stepped back toward his parents. Mrs. Kim put a comforting hand on his shoulder, which made several alien adults shake their heads in disapproval. Yuna tried next, approaching a young Krellian with a shy smile. "I like your armor. Is it heavy?" The young Krellian stood straighter. "Weight builds strength. Comfort creates weakness. Your soft clothing shows lack of discipline." The human children began to feel uncomfortable and moved closer to their families. This behavior only reinforced the aliens' belief that humans were too dependent on their guardians. "Most concerning," Headmaster Zix noted aloud. "The human young immediately seek guardian comfort when facing minor social challenges. This suggests they will struggle with our academic requirements." Commander Jiwan tried to defend her species. "Human children form strong family bonds that give them strength throughout their lives. This isn't weakness. It's our greatest strength." "We shall see," replied General Corex with obvious doubt. "The Academy will test all students equally. Those who cannot adapt will not succeed." As the orientation continued, the cultural differences became more obvious. When other species young faced questions or challenges, they handled them alone with serious, adult-like responses. When human children encountered the same situations, they looked to their parents for encouragement and support. Each time this happened, the alien adults exchanged meaningful looks. Their expressions clearly showed they believed humans were raising their children incorrectly. Dr. Hyunwoo watched everything carefully, taking mental notes. He knew this was just the beginning. The real test would come when the children started their studies and had to prove themselves in the Academy's challenging environment. The human families were given quarters in a section designated for species requiring high-maintenance guardian involvement. The location felt like a gentle insult, separating them from the normal students and families. As they settled into their new temporary homes, the human parents continued their caring behaviors. They unpacked their children's belongings, made sure everyone had comfortable sleeping arrangements, and planned to share meals together. Through the walls, they could hear the alien families conducting their affairs very differently. Vorthak families held brief, logical discussions about academic strategies. Krellian families engaged in physical training exercises. Etherian families meditated in complete silence. The contrast was obvious to everyone, and the judgment from other species was clear. Earth's parenting methods were being seen as a curiosity at best, and a serious flaw at worst. But the human families continued doing what felt natural to them, loving their children, supporting them, and preparing them to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They had no idea that soon their way of raising children would be put to the ultimate test. 3 weeks had passed since the human families arrived at Galactic Academy. The daily routine had settled into a pattern that made the cultural differences even more obvious to everyone on the station. Every morning at breakfast, the human children sat with their parents in the family dining area. Mrs. Kim would make sure Minho ate enough protein and vegetables, reminding him gently about his nutrition. The Park family shared stories about their day ahead, with little Yuna excitedly telling her parents about her classes. The Lee twins always sat close together, sharing their food and making each other laugh. At nearby tables, alien families conducted breakfast very differently. Young Vorthak ate measured portions of nutrition cubes while discussing academic schedules with their guardians in flat, emotionless voices. Krellian children stood at attention while consuming their meals quickly and efficiently, no talking aloud. Etherian youth floated silently, absorbing energy directly from glowing crystals. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Other species began pointing and whispering about the humans during meal times. Some alien students stared openly at the warm interactions between human parents and children, as if watching a strange performance. Dr. Yunwoo noticed the attention and tried to explain to curious aliens who approached him. Human families enjoy spending time together, he would say. Sharing meals and stories helps build strong relationships. Most aliens found this explanation puzzling. A Vorthak elder responded, efficiency would improve if young ones focused on nutrient intake rather than social bonding during consumption periods. The real problems began during the first parent-teacher conferences. Commander Jiwan accompanied the human families to meet with their children's instructors, expecting the usual discussions about academic progress and social development. The main conference room was enormous, with floating platforms for different species. Headmaster Zix stood at the center, surrounded by alien educators from various worlds. The human families sat together on one side, feeling very small in the vast space. We have completed our initial assessment of all students, Headmaster Zix announced. The results are quite revealing. Professor Vex, a Vorthak instructor, stepped forward with a glowing datapad. Human students show concerning dependency patterns. They frequently ask questions that could be answered through independent research. They seek approval before attempting new tasks. Most troubling, they request communication with family members during study periods. Mrs. Kim shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She remembered getting a call from Minho just yesterday when he felt nervous about a difficult math problem. She had encouraged him to try his best and reminded him that she believed in him. General Korax moved to the center of the room, his heavy footsteps echoing loudly. Krellian instructors report similar findings. Human young show weakness when facing academic challenges. They do not push through difficulties alone as proper students should. Instead, they seek emotional support. This is natural behavior for human children, Dr. Yunwoo said, standing up to defend the families. They learn better when they feel supported and encouraged. Perhaps that is the problem, said Elder Mistral, an Etherian who shimmered like starlight. Our young learn through isolation and self-reflection. They discover their own capabilities without external influence. This creates true wisdom and independence. Headmaster Zix nodded in agreement. We have observed human students helping each other with assignments. They share answers and work together on individual projects. This prevents proper assessment of their actual abilities. Mr. Park frowned. Helping others is something we teach our children. We believe cooperation makes everyone stronger. Several alien educators made sounds that indicated disagreement or amusement. Professor Vex spoke again. Cooperation during testing creates inaccurate results. How can we measure individual capability if students assist each other? Furthermore, General Corex added, constant guardian communication disrupts the learning environment. Crelly and Young have not contacted their family units since arriving. They focus entirely on their studies and training. Mrs. Lee looked worried. But children need to know their families love them and support them. This gives them confidence to try new things. Confidence should come from personal achievement, not external validation, Elder Mistral replied. Etheri and Young meditate alone. For months at a time. They develop inner strength that requires no outside support. The criticism continued for over an hour. The alien educators presented data showing that human children called their parents more than any other species. They shared examples of human students asking for help with homework, seeking comfort after difficult lessons, and expressing emotions openly during class. Every behavior that human parents considered normal and healthy was presented as evidence of weakness and poor preparation for adult life. Headmaster Zix pulled up holographic displays showing communication logs. Human students contact their families an average of 3.7 times per day. The next highest species averages 0.2 contacts per week. This dependency is unprecedented. Commander Jiwan tried to defend her people. Regular family contact helps human children feel secure. When they feel secure, they perform better academically and socially. The evidence suggests otherwise, Professor Vex replied coldly. Human students score lower on independence measurements than any other species. They require more instructor assistance and show higher stress levels when separated from guardians. The alien parents in attendance nodded their approval of the criticism. A Krellian father stood up and addressed the room. My offspring has not spoken to me since arrival. This is proper development. The young must learn to survive without parental assistance. A Vorthic guardian added, emotional attachment creates logical errors. Our young are trained from birth to make decisions based on facts, not feelings. This prepares them for leadership roles in galactic society. The human families felt increasingly isolated as the criticism mounted. Little Yuna had been sitting quietly next to her mother, but now she began to look ashamed. She had called her parents that morning to tell them about a drawing she made in art class. Hearing the alien adults talk about such behavior as weakness made her feel embarrassed. Soyan, another human student, sat with her mother Miang in the back of the room. She had been proud of her close relationship with her family, but now she wondered if the aliens were right. Maybe her need for her mother's love and encouragement really was a sign of weakness. The conference ended with Headmaster Zix making recommendations for the human families. We suggest reducing guardian contact to once per week maximum. Human students should be encouraged to solve problems independently. Emotional support should be minimized to promote proper development. Dr. Yunwu stood up firmly. We appreciate your feedback, but human families will continue following our natural parenting practices. We believe our methods produce strong, caring adults. We shall see, General Corex replied with obvious doubt. The Academy's testing will reveal which methods truly prepare young ones for the challenges of adult life. After the conference, the human families walked back to their quarters in uncomfortable silence. The children had heard everything and were beginning to question their own behavior. Were they really weaker than the alien students? Were their parents holding them back? That evening, news broadcasts across the galaxy picked up the story. Alien reporters discussed Earth's parenting crisis with obvious amusement. The reports showed footage of human children hugging their parents and compared it to the disciplined behavior of other species young. Human guardians display excessive emotional attachment to their offspring, one Vorthak news anchor reported. This behavior may explain their species' limited technological development compared to more advanced civilizations. A Krellian military commentator added, proper young are prepared for battle and hardship from birth. These human methods would produce soldiers too weak for real combat. The broadcasts were watched throughout the galaxy, and soon the human families began receiving messages from other worlds. Most were critical. questioning why Earth had been allowed into the Galactic Federation if their child-rearing methods were so obviously flawed. Some messages were cruel, mocking human parents for their primitive emotional behaviors. Others claimed that human children would never be able to compete with properly trained alien students. The pressure began to affect the human children deeply. Minho started avoiding his parents during mealtimes, trying to act more like the serious Vorthak students. Yuna stopped calling her parents when she felt scared or lonely, instead trying to handle everything alone like the young Krellians. The twins Taiho and Nari began sitting apart from each other, thinking that their close relationship was a sign of weakness. Soyeon pulled away from her mother Myung, refusing hugs and comfort even when she clearly needed them. Mrs. Kim noticed the changes in her son and felt her heart breaking. Minho seems so sad lately, she told her husband. He used to share everything with us, but now he barely talks. The other human parents reported similar changes in their children. The constant criticism from alien educators and media was making the human students ashamed of their natural family bonds. Dr. Hyunwoo watched everything with growing concern. He knew that human children were naturally social and needed family connections to thrive. But the pressure to conform to alien standards was forcing them to act against their nature. Commander, Giwon called a meeting with the human families that evening. I know this has been difficult for everyone, she said. But we cannot let alien criticism change who we are as humans. Our way of raising children has worked for thousands of years. But what if they're right? Mrs. Park asked quietly. What if we're making our children weak by loving them so much? Love never makes anyone weak, Commander Jiwon replied firmly. It makes us strong enough to face any challenge. We just need to prove that to the galaxy. The human families agreed to continue following their natural parenting instincts. Despite the mounting pressure from alien society, they had no idea that soon they would have the chance to prove that human methods of raising children were not weaknesses, but their greatest strength. The mockery would continue to grow, but the test that would change everything was coming closer every day. The second morning on Kepler 442b brought new dangers. The temperature was still dropping, and strange sounds echoed from the mountains surrounding the ruins. The alien students maintained their rigid systems, but cracks were beginning to show. In their approaches, a group of young Etherean students had been missing since the previous afternoon. They had wandered into a complex cave system while seeking individual meditation spaces and had not returned. The other Etherean students showed no concern, believing that each person must find their own way to wisdom. Elder Nyx floated calmly near the main ruins when Professor Vex approached her about the missing students. Should we organize a search party? He asked in his flat voice. Individual paths cannot be forced, Elder Nyx replied, shimmering with certainty. If they are meant to return, they will find the way themselves. Interference would damage their spiritual development. The missing students included some of the youngest children on the trip, but the adult supervisors agreed that maintaining educational philosophy was more important than organizing rescue efforts. Dr. Hyunwoo overheard this conversation and felt sick to his stomach. These were children, lost and probably scared, but the alien adults were willing to abandon them for the sake of teaching independence. He found Minho working with his Vorthek group near a collapsed wall. The human boy looked tired and cold, but he was trying to maintain the emotionless expression he had learned to copy from his alien classmates. Minho, Dr. Yunwoo said quietly, some of the younger students are missing in the caves. What do you think we should do? Minho looked around at his Vorthek teammates, who continued their work without showing any interest in the conversation. For weeks, he had been told that caring about others was weakness, that individual achievement was all that mattered, but the thought of small children lost and afraid in dark caves made his chest hurt. These were lessons his father Jinwoo had taught him long before he came to the academy. We never leave someone behind, his father had always said. Taking care of others is what makes us strong. We have to help them, Minho said, his voice growing stronger. It doesn't matter what the rules say. Those kids are scared and need us. For the first time in weeks, Minho sounded like himself again. Dr. Yunwoo smiled and nodded. Then let's go find them. The Vorthak students in Minho's group watched him leave with expressions of disapproval. Inefficient use of energy, one of them commented. Individual survival should be the priority. But Minho was already walking toward the cave entrance, his natural human compassion finally overcoming weeks of alien conditioning. Near the food distribution area, another crisis was developing. The alien students had established strict rationing based on age and perceived value. Older, stronger students received full portions while younger ones were expected to survive on less. Yuna watched a small Krellian child sitting alone, staring at his tiny portion of food. The older Krellian students had taken most of the supplies, leaving barely enough for the younger ones to survive. Yuna remembered her mother Summon's voice saying, "Make sure everyone has enough before you take seconds." It was a simple rule that her family had always followed, but here at the academy it was considered primitive thinking. The small, Krellian child looked up at Yuna with hungry eyes. His species was taught never to ask for help, never to show weakness. But he was clearly struggling. Yuna made a decision that went against everything the academy had taught her. She walked over and sat down next to the small child, then split her own food portion in half and offered him part of it. "Here," she said softly, "you need this more than I do." The young Krellian stared at her in surprise. In his culture, such kindness was unknown. Stronger individuals never shared with weaker ones. But he was so hungry that he accepted the food gratefully. Other students nearby watched this interaction with confusion. The older Krellian students looked angry that their established hierarchy was being challenged. The Vortex students recorded it as another example of human inefficiency, but some of the younger alien students began to look at Yuna with something like hope. They had been taught that asking for help was weakness, but seeing kindness offered freely made them remember feelings they had been told to suppress. Meanwhile, Taiho and Nari were experiencing the pain of forced separation. The academy had deliberately put them in different groups to break their unhealthy dependency. But the twins had always been each other's closest support. Taiho was working with a group of older Vorthix students who treated him like a tool rather than a person. They gave him the most dangerous tasks, like climbing unstable ruins to take measurements, without any concern for his safety. When Taiho slipped and nearly fell from a crumbling wall, his teammates showed no emotion. Calculation error, one of them noted. Improved precision required for future attempts. Taiho felt more alone than he had ever been in his life. He and Nari had always supported each other through difficult times, but now he was supposed to handle everything by himself. Nari was having similar struggles with her group of young Krellian students. They expected her to keep up with their brutal pace despite her smaller size, and when she showed signs of fatigue, they criticized her for weakness, but the twins could not ignore their natural bond. When they saw each other across the ruins, during work breaks, their eyes would meet and they would feel a little bit stronger. The lessons their parents had taught them about taking care of each other were too deep to be erased by a few weeks of alien training. Late that afternoon, the situation became critical. A group of students had discovered dangerous gas pockets in one of the ruin complexes. The toxic fumes had overcome several young aliens before they could escape the area. The alien students followed their training and evacuated the immediate area, leaving the unconscious students behind. Logical response to environmental hazard, the older Vorthak students agreed. Individual safety supersedes group rescue attempts? Commander Thrak nodded approvingly. Proper military thinking. Casualties are acceptable when mission safety is threatened. But Minho had just returned from organizing the search for the missing Etherian students. He had convinced several other human students to help him, and together they had found the lost children and guided them safely out of the caves. The success of that rescue mission had awakened something in the human students. They were remembering who they really were beneath the alien conditioning. When Minho saw the unconscious students lying in the toxic area, he did not hesitate. "We can't just leave them there," he called out to the other humans. Yuna heard him and came running along with the twins who had broken away from their assigned groups to be together. Other human students joined them, their natural compassion finally overcoming weeks of suppression. "It's too dangerous," Professor Vex warned them. "Individual preservation must take priority over rescue attempts." But the human students were no longer listening to alien logic. They quickly organized themselves into teams, using wet cloth to cover their faces and working together to pull the unconscious students to safety. The rescue took only minutes. But it required exactly the kind of cooperation and mutual care that the aliens had criticized as weakness. Each human student put themselves at risk to save others, working as a unified team rather than isolated individuals. Dr. Hyunwoo watched with pride as his people's children displayed the values their families had taught them. These were not weaknesses but strengths that no other species seemed to possess. The rescued students slowly regained consciousness, coughing and confused but alive. They looked up at their human rescuers with amazement, unable to understand why anyone would risk danger to help them. "Why did you save us?" asked a young Vortex student, his usual emotionless mask slipping to show genuine puzzlement. "Because that's what you do," Yuna replied simply. "When someone needs help, you help them." The alien students struggled to process this concept. Their cultures had taught them that individual survival was paramount, that helping others was a sign of weakness that would hold back their development. But lying there alive because of human kindness, they began to question everything they had been taught. Word of the rescue spread quickly through the camp. The alien adults discussed it with disapproval, seeing it as more evidence of human weakness and poor judgment. But some of the younger alien students began watching the humans differently. They noticed how the human students shared their food equally, how they comforted each other during the cold nights, how they worked together to solve problems instead of competing for individual glory. Most importantly, they saw that the humans were not weak at all. They were surviving the crisis better than anyone else because they supported each other instead of struggling alone. As night fell on their second day, stranded on Kepler 442b, a new dynamic was emerging in the camp. The human students had stopped trying to act like their alien classmates and were behaving according to their natural instincts, and slowly, carefully, some of the alien students were beginning to copy human behavior. Instead of the other way around, the revolution was just beginning. And it would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about strength, weakness, and the proper way to raise children. The third day on Kepler 442b brought the arrival of rescue ships from Galactic Academy. Commander Jiwan led the rescue fleet, her heart racing with worry about the human children. She had spent 3 sleepless days organizing the mission while solar storms made communication impossible. As the rescue ships descended through the orange atmosphere, Commander Jiwan expected to find chaos and casualties. Academy officials had warned her that stranded students would likely suffer from the harsh conditions and lack of proper supervision, but what she saw through the ship's viewing windows made her stop and stare in amazement. The camp below was not the disaster zone she had feared. Instead, she saw an organized community working together with smooth efficiency. Students from different species were cooperating in ways that had never been seen before at the academy. "Remarkable," said Headmaster Zix, who had come on the rescue. "Mission to assess the situation. The survival rate appears to be much higher than our projections indicated." Commander Jiwan landed her ship near the main camp and stepped out with the other rescue team members. What she found there challenged everything the galaxy believed about proper child development. Human students were clearly serving as leaders, but not through dominance or force. Instead, they had created systems based on cooperation and mutual care that other species were eagerly participating in. Minho was coordinating food distribution with a mixed group of students from 4 different species. He had organized them into teams that ensured everyone received equal portions, with extra care given to the youngest children regardless of their species. "Everyone gets breakfast first," Minho was explaining to a group that included Vorthak, Krelian, and Etherian students. "Then we clean up together, then we start the day's work. Nobody gets left behind." The alien students were following his instructions willingly, even eagerly. For the first time in their lives, they were experiencing what it felt like to be part of a caring community instead of a competitive hierarchy. Yuna had established what she called comfort circles, where students could share their fears and worries about being stranded. The idea came from her mother's practice of family discussions where everyone could express their feelings safely. Commander Jiwan watched in astonishment as young Krellian warriors sat in a circle with Etherian mystics and Vorthak logicians, all talking openly about their emotions. This kind of vulnerability would have been unthinkable in their home cultures, but here it was creating stronger bonds between them. "I was scared when the ships crashed," admitted a young Krellian who would normally never show weakness. "I thought we were going to die alone on this planet." "I felt the same way," replied a small Vorthak student. "But then Yuna taught us that scared feelings are normal and sharing them makes them smaller." The twins Taiho and Nari had abandoned the Academy's forced separation and were working together again. But instead of the unhealthy dependency that educators had worried about, their cooperation had become a model for other students. They had organized mixed-species teams for exploring the ruins safely. Each team included students with different strengths, and they supported each other through challenges instead of competing for individual achievement. "Taiho is good at climbing, so he checks the high places," explained a young Etherian student who had joined their team. "Nari is good at solving puzzles, so she figures out the safe paths. I can sense energy patterns, so I warn about dangerous areas. Together we can do things none of us could do alone." Dr. Yunwu approached Commander Jiwan with a detailed report of everything that had happened during the crisis. "The transformation has been incredible," he said. "When the alien methods started failing, the human students naturally returned to the values their families taught them. But more importantly, they started teaching those values to their alien classmates." "What do you mean?" Commander Jiwan asked. "The alien students are learning how to cooperate, how to show compassion, how to support each other emotionally," Dr. Hyunwoo explained. "For the first time in their lives, they're experiencing what it feels like to be truly cared for." Commander Jiwan watched a group of students working together to repair damaged equipment. The team included humans and aliens working side by side, sharing tools and encouraging each other. When someone made a mistake, the others helped fix it. Instead of criticizing the error, this level of cooperation would have been impossible before the crisis. The alien students had been trained to work in rigid hierarchies with no emotional connections. But exposure to human values was changing them in fundamental ways. Headmaster Zix was also observing the camp with growing amazement. His logical Vorthak mind was struggling to process what he was seeing. "The efficiency levels are unprecedented," he admitted to Commander Jiwan. "Normally, crisis situations result in decreased cooperation and increased individual survival behaviors. But these students are working together more effectively than established teams in controlled environments." Professor Vex approached them with his datapad, looking confused by his own readings. "The stress indicators are remarkably low," he reported. "Students who should be experiencing severe psychological trauma from the crash and stranding are instead showing improved mental health metrics." "How is that possible?" Headmaster Zix asked. "The human students appear to have created emotional support systems that reduce individual stress while improving group performance," Professor Vex replied, though he sounded like he was describing something he could not fully understand. "Commander, Thrak was having his own crisis of understanding." The military Krellian had spent his life believing that hardship should be endured alone and that emotional support created weakness. But the evidence before him contradicted everything his culture had taught him. Young Krellian students who had been struggling with the harsh survival conditions were now thriving under human-influenced care systems. They were stronger, not weaker, because they were receiving emotional support and working cooperatively instead of competitively. "This should not be possible," Commander Thrak muttered to himself. "Soft treatment should produce soft soldiers. But these young ones are performing better than our best military cadets." Elder Nix was floating among the students, observing their interactions with growing wonder. The Etherian teacher had believed for centuries that wisdom came only through isolation and individual meditation. but she was watching students achieve deeper understanding through sharing and cooperation. The young Etherians are displaying wisdom beyond their years, she said to the other adults. But it is not coming from solitary reflection. They are learning from each other, growing together in ways our traditional methods never produced. The most remarkable changes were visible in the alien students who had spent the most time with their human classmates. They were learning to express emotions, to ask for help when needed, and to offer support to others. A young Vorthak student approached Commander Jiwan with a shy smile. This display of emotion would have been considered a serious malfunction in Vorthak society, but here it seemed natural and healthy. The human students taught me that feelings are not logical errors, the young Vorthak explained. They are information. That helps us understand ourselves and others better. I feel happier and work better when I acknowledge my emotions instead of suppressing them. Similar transformations were happening throughout the camp. Krellian students were learning that asking for help was not weakness but wisdom. Etherian youth were discovering that cooperation could lead to insights that individual meditation never provided. The rescue team spent hours documenting what they found. Every measurement confirmed that the students had not merely survived their ordeal but had actually thrived under human influence. Leadership, academic performance had improved as students worked together instead of competing. Physical health was better because everyone ensured that basic needs were met equally. Psychological well-being was remarkably high due to the emotional support systems the humans had established. Most importantly, the alien students were displaying new capabilities that their traditional upbringings had never developed. They were solving complex problems through teamwork, showing creativity through emotional expression, and demonstrating leadership through caring rather than dominance. Commander Jiwan knew that word of this discovery would spread throughout the galaxy. The evidence was too clear to ignore. Human parenting methods had not only proven their worth, but had actually improved the development of alien children as well. As the rescue ships prepared to return to the academy, the students packed their belongings with reluctance. Many of the alien youth asked if they could continue working in the mixed teams that had formed during the crisis. "Can we keep having comfort circles when we get back to the academy?" asked a young Krellian who had learned to express his feelings for the first time. "Will we still be able to help each other with our studies?" wondered a Vorthak student who had discovered the joy of collaboration. The questions revealed how deeply the experience had changed them. They had tasted what it felt like to be part of a caring community, and they did not want to return to the cold isolation of their traditional cultures. Dr. Yunwu smiled as he listened to their requests. "We'll see what we can do," he promised them. "But remember, you've learned that you have the power to create kindness wherever you go." As the ships lifted off from Kepler 442b, Commander Jiwan looked back at the planet where everything had changed. The crisis that was supposed to prove human weakness had instead demonstrated humanity's greatest strength. The journey back to the academy would take several hours, but Commander Jiwan knew that the real journey was just beginning. The galaxy would soon learn that Earth's parenting methods were not primitive mistakes, but advanced wisdom that could benefit every species. The children who returned from Kepler 442b would carry with them the seeds of a revolution that would transform how the entire galaxy thought about strength, cooperation, and the proper way to raise young ones. 3 weeks had passed since the rescue from Kepler 442b, and tension filled every corridor of Galactic Academy. The alien leadership was struggling to accept what they had witnessed during the crisis. Emergency meetings were held daily as species. Representatives debated the implications of human parenting methods. The alien students who had experienced human-style cooperation were different now. They continued working together, sharing emotions, and supporting each other despite pressure from their own species to return to traditional behaviors. Commander Jiwan attended yet another Academy Council meeting where the debate raged on. Headmaster Zix presented his findings with typical Vorthak logic, but his conclusions clearly disturbed him. The evidence from Kepler 442b suggests that human child-rearing methods produce superior crisis response capabilities, he admitted reluctantly. However, we must consider that this was an isolated incident that may not represent broader patterns. General Korex slammed his armored fist on the table. One successful mission does not prove anything. Krellian methods have produced warriors for thousands of years. We will not abandon proven techniques based on a single unusual event. Elder Mistral shimmered with uncertainty. The young Etherians who participated in human-style cooperation have shown remarkable wisdom growth. But our traditional isolation methods have guided our species for millennia. Change should not be considered lightly. The debate continued for hours, with alien leaders finding excuse after excuse to dismiss the evidence. They could not accept that their advanced civilizations might learn something from the humans. They had mocked as primitive. Dr. Hyun-woo tried to present additional data about improved academic performance and psychological health among students who had adopted human cooperation methods, but the alien leaders remained skeptical. Temporary anomalies, Professor Vex declared. Extended observation periods are required before drawing conclusions about educational methodology effectiveness. The pressure was mounting for Earth to conform to galactic standards or face consequences. Several alien species threatened to request human removal from the Academy if their children continued to be corrupted by human values. Commander Ji-won felt the weight of representing her entire species. If the Academy expelled human students, it would damage Earth's standing in the Galactic Federation and limit future opportunities for cooperation. Meanwhile, the human families watched their children with pride and concern. The kids had returned from Kepler 442b more confident and compassionate than ever, but they faced constant criticism for their cooperative behaviors. Minho continued organizing inclusive lunch groups where students from different species ate together and shared stories. The alien educators disapproved, but more students joined these gatherings every day. Yuna kept holding her comfort circles, where students could express their feelings safely. Young aliens who had never been allowed to show emotion were discovering the relief that came from sharing their worries with caring friends. The twins Taiho and Nari worked openly together again, refusing to be separated. Their teamwork inspired other siblings from various species to reconnect with each other despite cultural pressure to maintain independence. The changes were spreading throughout the academy, but the adult leadership remained resistant. They scheduled formal hearings to determine whether human methods should be banned entirely from the institution. Then, on a quiet Tuesday morning, the alarms began screaming, the Academy's emergency alert system activated with deafening wails that echoed through every section of the massive space station. Red warning lights flashed in corridors as automated voices announced the crisis. Hull breach detected in sectors 7 through 12. Massive asteroid impact imminent. All personnel, report to emergency stations immediately. Commander Ji-won rushed to the command center where Academy officials were frantically trying to coordinate response efforts. The situation was worse than anyone had initially realized. A spatial anomaly had appeared near the Academy, creating an unstable asteroid field that was drifting directly toward the station. The massive rocks were moving too fast for the defense systems to destroy them all, and multiple impacts were inevitable. Evacuation protocols are overwhelmed, reported the Academy's emergency coordinator. We have over 8,000 students and staff from 47 different species. Standard procedures cannot handle this volume efficiently. The Academy's adult staff was trained for normal emergencies, but this crisis exceeded all their planning. Different species had incompatible evacuation procedures, communication problems were causing confusion, and panic was spreading through the younger students. In the first few minutes of the crisis, the traditional alien approaches were failing completely. Vorthok logic could not process the chaotic variables fast enough. Krellian military discipline was creating bottlenecks as everyone tried to follow rigid chain of command procedures. Etherian individual meditation was leaving students isolated and unable to coordinate with others. Commander Ji-won watched the chaos developing on the security monitors. Thousands of young beings were running in different directions, following incompatible instructions from their species adults. The system was breaking down just when coordination was most critical. But then something remarkable began happening. In the corridors where human students were present, order started emerging from the chaos. Minho appeared on one security monitor, calmly organizing a mixed group of panicking students into an efficient evacuation line. "Everyone stay together," his voice came through the intercom system. "Help the smaller kids, make sure nobody gets left behind. We'll get through this if we work as a team." The alien students around him responded immediately to his leadership. The cooperative habits they had learned during the Kepler 442b crisis kicked in automatically, creating organized movement where there had been confusion moments before. Yuna was visible on another monitor, establishing a safe zone in one of the damaged sections. She had gathered frightened students from multiple species and was using her comfort circle techniques to keep them calm while they waited for rescue. "It's okay to be scared," she was telling a group that included young Vorthak, Krelian, and Etherian students. "Being scared means we're being smart about danger. But we can be scared together and help each other stay safe." The twins Taiho and Nari had taken charge of supply distribution in an emergency shelter. They were working with alien students who had learned cooperation during the planetary crisis, ensuring that everyone had what they needed regardless of species or age. Throughout the academy, the pattern repeated itself. Wherever human students were present, the chaos transformed into coordinated response. The alien students who had been influenced by human values during the Kepler 442b incident became natural assistants and leaders themselves. Most remarkably, the cooperative behaviors were spreading to alien students who had never experienced human-style parenting before. The crisis was so severe that traditional methods were obviously failing, making students willing to try the human approach they had been taught to reject. Headmaster Zix watched the security feeds with growing amazement. The organization levels in human influence sectors are exponentially higher than in traditionally managed areas, he reported to the Emergency Command Center. Professor Vex was monitoring psychological stress indicators throughout the academy. Students in human-led groups are showing significantly lower panic responses despite facing identical danger levels, he observed with obvious puzzlement. General Korex was coordinating military response efforts when he noticed something that challenged everything he believed about leadership. "The human young are not commanding through dominance or rank," he said slowly. "They lead through inspiration and care. And it is more effective than our military hierarchies." Elder Nix was drifting through the evacuation zones, observing how different groups were handling the crisis. "Individual meditation techniques are insufficient for this emergency," she admitted. "But the human cooperation methods are producing unprecedented coordination between species." As asteroid impacts began hitting the Academy's outer sections, the difference between human-influenced and traditional alien response became even more obvious. Areas managed according to alien protocols were experiencing higher casualties and slower evacuation rates, but sections where human students had established cooperative leadership were functioning like well-trained emergency teams. They moved efficiently, cared for the injured, and maintained morale even as the crisis intensified. Dar Hyun-woo was helping coordinate rescue efforts when he received reports that made his heart swell with pride. Human children were risking their own safety to rescue alien students trapped in damaged sections. The values their parents had taught them were being displayed on the largest possible stage. "Minho's team just pulled 17 students out of a collapsed corridor," came one report. "Yuna established a medical station that's treating injuries from 6 different species. The Lee twins organized a supply chain that's keeping the emergency shelters operational." But the most important development was how the alien students were responding. Exposed to human leadership during a real crisis, they were learning cooperation and compassion faster than anyone had thought possible. Young Vortex students were abandoning logical detachment to comfort frightened classmates. Krelian children were ignoring rank structure to help anyone who needed assistance. Etherian youth were working in groups instead of seeking individual enlightenment. The transformation was happening in real time as thousands of alien students discovered that caring for others made them stronger, not weaker. Commander G1 moved through the academy coordinating with human families while monitoring the overall response. What she saw convinced her that this crisis would change everything. The human children are not just surviving this emergency, she reported to Earth Command. They're transforming how every species approaches cooperation and crisis management. Hours later, when the asteroid storm finally passed and the immediate danger was over, the Academy's leadership gathered to assess what had happened. The statistics were undeniable. Sections managed using human cooperation methods had evacuation efficiency rates 40% higher than traditional approaches. Injury rates were 30% lower in human-influenced areas. Psychological trauma indicators were dramatically reduced among students who had experienced human-style leadership during the crisis. Most importantly, the alien students who had been taught human cooperation techniques during the emergency were refusing to return to their species. Traditional isolation methods. "I want to keep working in teams like the humans taught us," declared a young Vorthak who had helped organize evacuation efforts. "Logic works better when we combine different minds instead of thinking alone. Sharing feelings about scary things made me braver, not weaker," said a small Krellian who had participated in one of Yuna's comfort circles during the crisis. "I want to keep talking about emotions with my friends. Helping others felt better than just taking care of myself," admitted a young Etherian who had worked with the Lee twins on supply distribution. "I learned more about wisdom through cooperation than I ever did through isolation." The evidence was overwhelming. Human parenting methods had not only proven their worth, but had actually improved the capabilities of alien students who experienced them. Headmaster Zix stood before the Academy Council that evening, his logical, Vorthak mind finally accepting what the evidence showed. "The data is conclusive," he announced. "Human child-rearing methodologies produce superior results in crisis situations, academic cooperation, and psychological resilience." General Korax removed his military helmet in a gesture of respect. Krellian warriors are taught that strength comes from individual hardship. But human strength comes from caring for others, and it is more powerful than anything our methods have produced. Elder Nix shimmered with new understanding. Etherian wisdom has always emphasized individual enlightenment. But the humans have shown us that wisdom grows faster when shared with others in bonds of affection and support. The Academy Council voted unanimously to adopt human cooperation and emotional support methods as core curriculum options for all species. The parenting approaches that had been mocked as primitive weakness were now recognized as advanced wisdom. News of the Academy's decision spread throughout the galaxy within hours. Species that had criticized Earth's methods were now requesting human educators to teach their own children about cooperation and compassion. The human families watched the celebration with tears of joy and pride. Their children had not only proven themselves, but had helped transform an entire galaxy's understanding of what made young people truly strong. Commander G1 stood with Dr. Hyunwoo at the Academy's main viewing window, watching ships arrive from dozens of worlds carrying alien families who wanted their children to learn human values. "They finally understand," Dr. Hyunwoo said with satisfaction. "Strength doesn't come from emotional coldness and harsh independence. It comes from the ability to care for others and work together." In the student quarters, human and alien children were already planning new cooperative projects, forming friendships that crossed species boundaries, and discovering that their differences made them stronger when they worked together. The mockery had ended. The galaxy had learned that Earth's greatest export was not technology or resources, but the simple human understanding that love makes children strong enough to save worlds. The alarms had stopped, but the transformation they triggered would echo across the stars for generations to come.